We spent a lot of time on Friday's show talking about the offense and not worrying about the Giants' offense and that it was too early to be concerned and that there were signs of life. Well, 24 runs in Washington, D.C. later, the Nationals scored, 6 runs in the series? Things are looking a little better for the San Francisco Giants. We'll break down all that went well and also some injury updates, some COVID updates next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And coming up on today's show, 24 runs, that's 8 runs per game, to 6 in this series against the Nationals. Yes, they're an inferior opponent, but this is what you're supposed to do. And when we look at something like runs per game, guess what? We count the games when you're playing the teams that are inferior, right? Like, you don't just play elite teams all the time, and so you put up a lot of runs sometimes against inferior opponents. This is something I argue on Twitter about all the time, which I maybe should just stop doing. But the fact that, we count the games when they score a lot of runs. Like, people want to say, well, a lot of their runs came in a couple of games. Well, guess what? Those runs counted. It's like me saying, if I was trying to be overly optimistic and saying, well, if you take out their lowest scoring games, they're actually scoring a lot more. You can't just take out their lowest scoring games. So anyway, we can't just take these ones out. The Giants broke through in this series against the Nationals as they were supposed to do. You never really can assume a sweep in baseball. It is not that kind of sport. Even if you're the better team, you often don't end up sweeping. So the Giants did well to sweep this series. It's a very difficult road trip that they're on right now. It's ongoing. They're 7-3 so far, and they have one more game today in Milwaukee because of the lockout, right? Because they were supposed to play in Milwaukee in their second series of the season. It was supposed to be 3 against the Padres in San Diego and then 3 against the Brewers in Milwaukee. But those 6 games to start the year got wiped out. We just started a week late and we didn't make up those games at all. We didn't push the whole schedule back. So those 6 games are going to get made up throughout the course of the year. And that's what's happening here with the Giants playing this one in Milwaukee. But what really went on in Washington, D.C. and overall in the season offensively now, basically is that there was a little mean reversion, right? The Giants were not going to struggle as much as they were. And they end up coming out of this series ranked 8th in Fangraphs wins above replacement as an offensive unit. So that's counting hitting, base running, and defense and combining it all together. So they're 8th in the major leagues as an offensive, and by I mean the position players, the non-pitchers, are 8th in the game. By weighted runs created plus, they're actually 15th, so right in the middle, but they're at 107, meaning they're above league average. So they're the median, but in terms of the mean, they're actually above average. So, they've got a lot of guys swinging the bats well, including Joc Pederson, who hit 2 home runs on Sunday. And I want to get into this a little bit about Joc Pederson. It was a, quote, disappointing signing for a lot of people, in large part because it was a smaller deal, right? It was a 1-year, $6 million deal. But we've said this before, and I'm going to say it again now. Dan Szymborski, who does Zips projections that you've probably heard of, and he's a writer for Fangraphs, he wrote an article when the Giants signed Joc Pederson saying that for Peterson, if he had reached free agency after the 2019 season, Szymborski's projection system would have pegged Peterson for a 4-year deal worth roughly $74 million. And so the fact, I mean, so he didn't like get old in the last couple of years. What happened was he had a down 2020 season, which of course was the COVID year, so it's not really a season. And then in 2021, it was pretty mediocre as well. But there's not a lot of reason to think that he's completely just fallen off a cliff. So the fact that the Giants were able to get him for 1 year, $6 million says more to the fact that it was potentially a very solid value than that he's just a washed up player. And so for the people who like wanted players in the realm of 4 years, $75 million, a la Kyle Schwarber, who, by the way, so Schwarber gets 4 years, $79 million from the Phillies. And I think that Schwarber and Peterson in a lot of ways are similar players. Left-handed hitters, mash right-handed pitching, not necessarily the best defensive players. I would say Peterson better than Schwarber even, and maybe on both sides. But by the way, Schwarber for the Phillies getting whatever it is, $19 million, almost $20 million per season for 4 years, has gotten off to a much slower start than Peterson. Schwarber's hitting 169 with a 246 on base and 407 slugging, and 88 weighted runs created plus. And we can talk about Marcus Semien has been bad. Trevor Story has been bad. Carlos Correa has been bad. So a lot of the top free agent signings by other teams have struggled a lot. And a guy like Joc Pederson is out here just completely tearing the cover off the ball among the very best in the game right now. And so for those who like you wanted Schwarber, just Peterson like is Kyle Schwarber, but just coming off a down year, so he was available for 1 year, $6 million. Would it somehow make you feel better if the Giants had signed Peterson to imagine he signed for 4 years, $74 million instead of 1 year, $6 million? Does that somehow make you feel better about him? That I just don't understand. For me, it's ultimately about how do you produce on the field? And like for Carlos Rodón, same thing. If he has a monster season, he's going to go out there and get a huge contract. I don't know if it's going to be from the Giants. I would assume not if it's a long-term deal for a pitcher, which he could be in line to get. But the only reason the Giants didn't have to give that up this offseason is because there were some question marks about his health and how his velocity fell off a cliff last year, but then it picked back up in the playoffs. But for me, I don't care like what the contract is. I mostly care if you're going to go out there and play at an elite level. Who cares that Joc Pederson's making 1 year, $6 million versus 4 years, $80 million? If the production is there, but you're getting it without risk. Because here's the thing: you look at a guy like Rodón, and you might be thinking, well, the Giants absolutely should give him this huge contract. Well, we can look at another guy. How about what's his name? The starter on Friday for the Nationals, Patrick Corbin, who I remember when he was a free agent not that long ago, I thought he was potentially a fit for the Giants, and I was interested in the Giants signing him, and he ends up getting a long-term deal from the Nationals for $140 million. He had a great first season, and the Nationals won the World Series. So in a lot of ways, you can make the case that it worked out. But ever since then, 2020, 2021, and so far in 2022, it's been an utter disaster. And this is not to even speak of Steven Strasburg, who reached free agency after they won the World Series. And since that time has just been completely a non-factor, either injured or ineffective, 100%. And they gave him like $250 million. So look at these contracts and understand that there's a lot of risk that goes along with them. And that seems to be what the Giants are trying to avoid. It's getting caught up with players who potentially could doom them, like Patrick Corbin has kind of done for the Nationals. Look at what happened to the Nationals going from World Series champs in 2019 to whatever they are now, right? They are a shell of themselves. They even have a player like Juan Soto, and they're just not able to win. And a lot of it has to do with the contracts they gave to Patrick Corbin and Steven Strasburg. And it's just important to remember, at the time when those guys were out there, they were hot commodities. People didn't think of them like we think of them now, like avoid at all costs, utter disaster, albatross contracts. They were desirable, but it's kind of doomed them. And so the Giants, with their 2-year deal for Rodón and their 1-year, $6 million deal for Peterson, they're seeing that they can get that kind of production without the huge associated risk. And I think that that's what's appealing to them in a lot of ways. But certain players are exceptions, like Bryce Harper was an exception when they pursued him and offered him 12 years, $310 million. And guess what? Bryce Harper has been good for pretty much the duration of that deal. So it's like even the guys that they've targeted in those types of situations have been worth it. So I think in certain cases they see exceptions, but certain guys are not exceptions, like Kyle Schwarber this offseason. They didn't view him, I don't think, as an exception to the rule about maybe not going down that rabbit hole and exposing themselves to that kind of risk. So coming up next, we'll talk more about what's going on with some injuries. Anthony DeSclafani to the injured list. Mike Yastrzemski has COVID-19. So what is going on and how are the Giants going to respond? With spring in the air, it's a time of renewal and growth, personally and professionally. As your small business grows, LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a new job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonmlb. That's linkedin.com/lockedonmlb to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, as promised, I want to talk more specifically about what is going on with the San Francisco Giants, some of these injuries that they're dealing with. Last time we talked, we were speculating about who was going to be called up. We'll talk about for Steven Duggar going on the injured list, so we'll break down that a little bit. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast, recaps of MLB games with analysis from our local experts, taking fans through the season like no other network. Free and available wherever you get podcasts. So yeah, I also want to mention before I move on that Connor Joe has come up a little bit lately on my Twitter timeline. Andy Baggerly tweeted, he's been tweeting about Connor Joe, which I think good for Bags for doing that because Connor Joe is having success with the Colorado Rockies. And before you jump to conclusions and say it's the Rockies, it doesn't count, the success he was having just the other day that we were focusing on this tweet from Baggerly, he's doing it on the road right now. So Connor Joe has just been a good player for the Colorado Rockies ever since they were able to acquire him. And I made the point, for those clamoring for a right-handed bat, Connor Joe would have been a very good one to still have around. He's under club control for the next 6 seasons. He's optionable at this point. When the Giants had him in 2019, he was not optionable because he was a Rule 5 pick. So they had to have him on the roster all season long or else offer him back to the Dodgers, which is ultimately what happened because after 16 plate appearances, there was a lot of pressure. I don't know if they caved to the pressure, if they really felt like it was time to move on. But they ended up, cutting him and then giving him back to the Dodgers. And in 2020, he didn't play. He had cancer and was able to overcome that. In 2021, ends up in the Rockies organization and then starts playing at the major league level and has success. And then this year, he's continuing to have that success. So this ties in with what I was saying about Harper. Even when they're wrong, they're right. Like even when with the guys like Connor Joe and Bryce Harper, they liked Connor Joe, just he weren't able to give him a long enough opportunity, but now he's having success somewhere else. And they wanted to sign Bryce Harper, and he's been an exception. Like some of these other contracts I'm talking about, how they've turned into utter disasters quickly, Harper's has not. He won the MVP award last year. So super trust the process vibes from me. I just think that they've done a tremendous job with the players they've brought in, and even the players who haven't worked out have worked out with somebody else. And there's not a lot of players they liked and targeted that ended up flopping. So that's my 2 cents on that. And he very much would have been a good player. Connor Joe, I mean, perfect kind of right-handed outfielder for this team if they are like one player short. Don't think about Nick Castellanos and whoever else. Connor Joe would have been a great answer in the outfield as a right-handed hitter. So anyway, what is going on more specifically with the San Francisco Giants? Well, Tony DeSclafani, as we're going to call him now, because that's what everyone else seems to call him within the Giants organization, he goes on the injured list with right ankle inflammation after his last start on Thursday in New York was another clunker for him. When you look at the numbers, the only kind of thing is that the average on balls in play is super inflated. And I've said this repeatedly, that doesn't always mean luck, right? It can mean that you're getting lit up. And he was kind of getting just lit up in the sense of allowing a lot of hits. And so it turns out he's got an ankle issue, and it's the same issue that cropped up for him at some point last season. And he went on the injured list with that, but he only missed limited time. So hopefully it's a minor injury again this time. I believe he's having it scanned, probably an MRI today on Monday. So we will learn more, but he goes on the IL. Alex Cobb is already on the IL. So 2/5 of their starting rotation currently on the injured list. So they had a bullpen game in the first game against the Nationals. It's easy to take for granted how they went out there and did they pitch a shutout or allow 1 run? It was either 1 run or 0. On Friday, Jacob Junis was called up as we thought maybe Tyler Beede was in some jeopardy, but they made the move of putting DeSclafani on the 10-day IL and Steven Duggar on the 60-day IL, which opened up a 40-man spot for Luis Gonzalez to ultimately be added. But they also added Jacob Junis with those 2 moves, right? One for Gonzalez to be added and the other for Junis to be added. And Jacob Junis just went out there and was excellent in 5 or 6 innings. I don't have the box score pulled up. 5 or 6 shutout innings, really interesting pitch mix. It was, 88% sliders and changeups and 12% fastballs. So overwhelming, we call it secondary stuff, but really the fastball for Junis was the secondary stuff. The primary stuff was the slow stuff. So really interesting mix, and he just attacked the strike zone for the most part and had a really good, sharp, big slider. And the changeup was good as well. I watched his first start of the year for Sacramento, and I was impressed by the stuff, but he ended up getting hit around a little bit. And that's something that continued over his next couple of AAA starts. But clearly they see something in Jacob Junis, and we all saw it as well if we watched that game on Friday. He was spectacular, and it would be hard to send him down at this point. The Giants do sometimes do that, where there's a player you don't think has any chance of getting sent down, and they do. And a lot of times it's simply because it's a matter of who has options and who doesn't. And Junis can be optioned, but he was so good, and they're going to play another bullpen game today. I don't know if Junis is available. Probably not, given that he just pitched 5 or 6 innings a couple days ago. So that's basically a start, even though he came out of the pen. Sam Long, I must say, I don't think I've mentioned him at all this season, which is my bad, because he's kind of flown under the radar. But he started that game on Friday, and he was also excellent, and he's been excellent this season. So in their bullpen game, again, it's easy to take for granted that they just pitched phenomenally in a bullpen game. So that just speaks to the depth of this pitching staff. It's not Rodón and Webb. It's Sam Long and Jacob Junis going out there and shutting out a major league team. There was an unwritten rules controversy again, which is so stupid. I'll save that for a few minutes from now because I want to get to the rest of the injuries going on and specifically get to Mike Yastrzemski testing positive for COVID-19 prior to yesterday's game. He apparently felt sick on Saturday with a sore throat and then tested positive on Sunday. So he has to quarantine in Washington, D.C. So he's going to be staying there. You have to quarantine for 10 days, or if you can get 2 negative PCR tests before 10 days, then you're also cleared to leave and then rejoin the team. So apparently he's, mild symptoms, so that's good to hear. And the fact of the matter is he's not here, and that's unfortunate because he was swinging the bat as well as anyone at the time. But next man up mentality, right? They kind of didn't miss a beat on Sunday. They just shift guys around with their versatile roster. And not that you didn't notice, but you almost didn't notice that he was even out there. And that just speaks again to the depth. And obviously, I'm a big Mike Yastrzemski fan, and I think he's been swinging the bat better than he gets credit for this season. Hit into some bad luck early, but he was really starting to find it. Started against Patrick Corbin on Friday, a lefty. So that's a big deal that they put him in there against a lefty, and he had a big hit against a lefty. So he's been patient more than usual. He's just not chasing out of the strike zone. I'm just excited about what we're going to get out of Mike Yastrzemski this year. So it's unfortunate that he goes on the COVID IL. But the Giants will get to add an extra player. They didn't do it on Sunday because there simply wasn't enough time to get someone to Washington, D.C. with Yaz testing positive in the morning right before their game. So in Milwaukee today, they will have an extra player. I don't know exactly who it's going to be, but it's going to be somebody. So look out for an extra player to be added for today's game against Milwaukee. Coming up next, we'll talk about the unwritten rules controversy that happened again. It was stupid again. The Nationals looked like a bunch of babies again, like the Padres did earlier on in the season. So we'll talk about that. And also, how about this? Lamont Wade Jr. getting much closer to returning. What's the latest on him? We'll talk about that as well. This is the time of year, though, that I've pretty much given up on all of my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a protein bar. They're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Scroll down to the macros chart on Built.com and you'll be blown away. High protein, low calorie, high fiber, low carb, and importantly to me, low sugar. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, here we go. I want to talk about Lamont Wade Jr. being close to returning. What does that mean? What's the latest? And also, this unwritten rules nonsense that continues to make Giants opponents look like big babies. So, where to start? Those are two juicy topics. Let's first talk about the unwritten rules stuff. So what happened was the Giants were up by 6. It was 7-1 in the top of the 9th. And Thairo Estrada is on first base with 2 outs. And the Nationals elect to not hold him on at first base. So normally, right, the first baseman is standing there ready for a pickoff throw from the pitcher. So as a runner on first, you can't get too big of a lead because they are liable to pick off. And if your lead is too big, you can be out. So down by 6 runs in the 9th, the Nationals elected to not even hold him on with 2 outs. And so they're giving you second base. And what they're doing is assuming that you're not going to take it. And the idea, I suppose, is like your sportsmanship is going to prevent you from taking that extra base because they're essentially conceding that you've kicked their butt enough that they're not going to come back. Well, guess what? The Giants don't care. If you're going to give them that free base, if you don't want to defend against it, they're going to take it. Sorry. So Thairo Estrada takes off on the pitch. Brandon Crawford hits a little pop-up to shallow left that falls in between the shortstop and the left fielder. With there being 2 outs, Estrada just keeps on running after taking off on the pitch. And ultimately, they send him home to try to score because it takes a while to get corralled in the outfield. So I think it was Alcides Escobar picks up the ball, throws home. They get Thairo Estrada out at the plate. Regardless, we don't have to get into whether or not it was a good send. I actually do think it's a good send with 2 outs. But Estrada is out. Okay, great. But the Nationals, specifically Alcides Escobar and Victor Robles, just start yelling into the Giants dugout and pointing, and I don't know exactly what they said, but they obviously had an issue with Estrada stealing when he wasn't being held on in a 6-run game in the ninth. So they broke an unwritten rule again. The unwritten rule being, we're not going to hold you on because it's hard to explain. The idea is they're conceding, but the reality is they're not conceding. They're going to continue to try to win that game. And if they win it, they're not going to apologize or give back any runs. And so it's just incredibly dumb. Maybe if you're up by 20 or something in that situation, I get it. But the Giants have said they don't care in that situation either because they want to continue to put pressure on the opposing pitching staff. And it also applies to the Giants pitching staff because they're only up by 6 there. And the Nationals had some really good hitters coming up. Juan Soto, Nelson Cruz, and Josh Bell is almost as dangerous as any middle of the lineup in baseball, potentially. They're certainly capable of 2 guys getting on and then boom, 3-run homer, all with no outs. And then suddenly your 6-run lead is a 3-run lead. And that is a heck of a lot different than 6 runs, and it can happen in a flash. And so from the Giants' perspective, if that were to happen, they would have to get up Camilo Doval or Jake McGee or Tyler Rogers and bring them into that game potentially. And they want to avoid that, obviously, because the extra rest is important and it can have a ripple effect. And so if you're going to just not even hold them on, they're going to take that base. And I don't have a problem with it. I actually think it makes so much sense. And the unwritten rules crybabies look like dinosaurs and idiots to me when this is happening. And the Giants are just like, it's not personal. It's not about feelings. We just want to keep applying pressure to our opponent in this professional competition that we are a part of right now. And the other team's like, no, that hurts my feelings. Come on, get over it. You look like idiots. And I mean, even in the post-game comments, the Nationals manager was like, you can ask Gabe Kapler about that. No, answer it yourself. You guys were the ones who had a problem. The Giants didn't have a problem at all. They're just trying to play baseball. And by the way, the fans are there to watch you play baseball. They're not there to watch the two teams kind of baby each other and give up on each other midway through the game. Come on. And there's so many reasons that this doesn't make any sense at all. But I also want to just mention, in 2019, yes, that was a Nationals team that went on to win the World Series, but it's just a couple years ago, 3 seasons ago, but it was the end of 2019, and right now we're at the beginning of 2022. So really, it's about 2 seasons ago. The Nationals won a game that they trailed by 6 runs going into the 9th inning. And imagine if their opponent had chances to add on in the 9th, but kind of took it easy on the Nationals. So yes, this is a worse version of the Nationals, but that middle of the lineup is just as good with Soto, Cruz, and Bell. Those guys can absolutely get a rally started there. And you're not actually conceding. The idea is that we've conceded, you're going to win. But in reality, they would take it if they came back. And so you can't tell me it's impossible, right? It's baseball. It's not over until you get the last out. There's no clock. It's very different than basketball. If you're up by 30 with a minute left, it's just impossible to come back. Versus in baseball, it's never impossible. So I just love what the Giants are doing. Random thought, I love the bunt hits that they're continuing to exploit. So keep on keeping on, San Francisco Giants. They're kind of an inspiration to the rest of baseball to finally get past some of these ridiculous unwritten rules. So lastly, LaMonte Wade Jr. started a rehab assignment on Saturday. I would not be surprised if he ends up back on the active roster, not for today's game in Milwaukee, but for the start of the homestand, finally, against the A's on Tuesday. So LaMonte Wade Jr. close to coming back. I think that potentially makes a big difference. Unfortunately, Yaz is now out, but when Yaz is healthy against righties, you can have an outfield of Wade, Yastrzemski, and Joc Pederson. And I think that's really, really solid. 3 guys who can absolutely handle right-handed pitching and are solid defensively as well. So anyway, coming up tomorrow, we'll talk about today's game in Milwaukee. It's going to be tough. You're facing the reigning Cy Young Award winner. This has been a brutal road trip for the Giants, so don't be shocked if they don't win this game. If they win it, it's just absolute gravy. But even if they lose, they've had a 7-4 road trip through kind of running the gauntlet here against some good teams and some bad weather and just a long, grueling trip, a one-city road trip. Come on, give me a break. Anyway, can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. Make your second listen Locked on MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully, brings you his unique perspective on the major leagues, past and present. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Anyway, can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thank you so much for listening. Stay Locked on Giants.